Dear panelists, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our side event of the 60th session of the Human Rights Council on the theme Japan and Human Rights. My name is Jacques Marion. I'm the chairman of the Universal Peace Federation for Europe and the Middle East, and I will be the moderator for this session. Since 1 year, we've gathered here 4 times at the United Nations in Geneva to expose the human rights and religious freedom violations that characterize the anti-unification church campaign in Japan. Today, our panel of experts, including 2 panelists coming from Japan, will present the Japanese government's repressive measures and their plan for deprogramming unification church children from their parents' faith. And you will hear a direct testimony from a Japanese unification church second-generation member. To introduce our meeting, we have a recorded speech from Dr. Jan Figel, a former EU Commissioner and Deputy Prime Minister of Slovakia. He was the first European Union Special Envoy for the promotion of freedom of religion or belief outside the EU. He is currently the President of the Forum for Religious Freedom in Europe. Let's watch the video.
Distinguished participants, greetings to all of you in Geneva. In March 2025, the Tokyo District Court under the Civil Code ordered the dissolution of the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification, formerly known as Unification Church. Since this unprecedented decision, I am deeply concerned. The order lacks a constitutional legal basis and clearly violates Japan's obligations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Such measure endangers not only one minority faith, but also others, because injustice against one community always threatens others. The ruling will have its implications for religious freedom in Japan. The decision is based on questionable evidence and accusations. It lacks substantive foundation and appears to have been driven more by political motives than by law. What in particular troubles me about this ruling? The court's decision is arbitrary, unconstitutional, and unlawful. It violates basic principles of due process. For example, the hearings have been conducted behind closed doors. Article 81 of the Religious Corporations Act allows dissolution only when an organization commits illegal acts that seriously harm public welfare. Yet the Tokyo District Court expanded this to include 32 civil cases, spanning 40 years, involving former members. The Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology even changed its interpretation of the law in order to request dissolution, something unprecedented. Furthermore, missionary activity and donations were judged to violate social norms and social fairness. But these concepts are far too vague, opening the door to arbitrary use of state and judicial power. The United Nations Human Rights Committee has already recommended that Japan refrain from restricting religious freedom on the basis of public welfare. Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights does not allow such restrictions. On the contrary, states are obliged to protect minority religions against hostility from dominant groups. Instead, Japan tolerated forced deprogramming by Protestant pastors. Many plaintiffs in this case were themselves subjected to coercion and confinement. Even worse, the Tokyo District Court adopted the unscientific mind control theory, assuming victimhood without evidence. This is proof of bias and arbitrariness. Legitimate courts must not be swayed by political pressure or media campaigns. The future of Japanese democracy depends on transparency, accountability, respect for human dignity, and the protection of fair justice for all. Politically, I must say that the movement against the Family Federation has roots in the Japanese Communist Party's activities decades ago. Marxist atheism lies at the root of this long-standing hostility. Such ideology often inspires radical attempts to exclude faith in God and suppress religion, because religion liberates people from the worship of secular values and authoritarian state power. I know this from my experience. I lived half of my life under communist dictatorship in Czechoslovakia. My own uncle Jan was killed by the secret police. The regime sought to crush both historic and new religions through many forms of coercion, but it ultimately failed and then peacefully collapsed in 1989. In Slovakia, the main force behind the peaceful resistance and the fight for freedom was the Christian community, especially the Catholic Church and dissent. If the district court decision is confirmed, it will damage Japan's image and credibility as a democracy and may endanger other minority religions, including smaller and newer groups, such as Jehovah's Witnesses. Japan should learn from the harm caused worldwide by state-imposed ideologies and religious oppression, which have often led to deep internal divisions. The state exists to serve all citizens, not just the majority or a favored group. Ladies and gentlemen, religious freedom is a litmus test for all human rights. Why? Freedom of religion is inseparable from freedom of thought and conscience. It belongs to everyone, believers, non-believers, and atheists alike. This inner freedom is guaranteed by Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. If this inner freedom is not respected, the outer freedoms, freedom of speech, press, assembly, association, will also be endangered. It begins inside each person and is expressed outwardly through acts of faith, family, and community. Internal freedom is absolute and must be fully respected by state and institutions. External expression can be regulated only if restrictions are legal, necessary, and proportionate. I oppose dissolution of the Family Federation from the beginning. I wrote personally to Japan's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, but so far received no reply. However, opposition abroad is growing. Japan has long been respected as a moderate democracy, but its reputation is now at risk. I hear concerns, shock, and even protests from governments and civil society worldwide. How a country treats minorities, not its majority, is the true measure of its democratic credibility. The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, Nasila Ghania, requested to visit Japan to investigate possible violations of minority rights. Unfortunately, the Japanese government has not allowed her visit. Japan should engage in dialogue with her and with the United Nations. The Family Federation Church appealed against the district court verdict, and the case is now before the Tokyo High Court. There is still hope for a fair and positive judicial resolution. Ladies and gentlemen, even democratic countries are not fully immune against ideologies or abuse of power. Therefore, people, society, must remain vigilant on protection on human dignity of all and human rights for all. Thank you for your attention and support.
Thank you. We are grateful to Dr. Figel. Thank you for his very articulate and very clear presentation on the case in Japan. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Norishige Kondo, who is the Vice Director of the Legal Department of the Family Federation, formerly Unification Church, in Japan, and he will talk about the danger of religious eradication based on manipulation of public opinion. He will have a PowerPoint, so please put on the PowerPoint. Mr. Congo, the floor is yours.
Thank you for coming. My topic today is the danger of religious eradication based on public opinion manipulation. The official name of our church is Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. However, I think you are familiar with the former name, Unification Church. So, in my presentation, I used the abbreviation of our former name, UC. On July 8, 2022, former Prime Minister Abe was assassinated. The suspect claimed his motive was his mother's donation to the UC 2 decades earlier, which has led to the collapse of his family. He also resented Abe for sending a video message to UPF, an affiliated organization of the UC. But can such an excuse for murder rarely be accepted? Nevertheless, anti-UC lawyers network immediately took advantage of this incident to launch attacks on the UC. Let me explain the basic stance of the major media in Japan. Japan's major media outlets are in general left-leaning. They tend to be hostile toward conservative politicians, such as former Prime Minister Abe. In fact, just as the mainstream media in the United States strongly opposed President Trump, the Japanese major media consistently opposed Prime Minister Abe. Minority religions also became convenient targets for media attacks, since criticizing cults was a way to boost ratings. Because the UC and its affiliated organizations took an anti-communist stance and actively campaigned for the enactment of an anti-spy law, the media were particularly eager to criticize the UC. Knowing the tendencies of the media, the anti-UC lawyers network exploited the Abe incident to attack the UC, creating the false impression against UC. They categorically labeled the UC as a great evil and denounced it as a cause of Abe's assassination, gave the impression that the UC was still causing massive economic damage nationwide. They spread propaganda that the UC was a dangerous cult, that all UC members were victims under mind control, and that all donation constituted victimization. Their manipulation of public opinion succeeded, and Japanese society came to be dominated by the perception that the UC was nothing less than a heinous criminal organization. In Japan, being an island nation, society places strong pressure on individuals to conform. During World War II, anyone who opposed the war was condemned as unpatriotic. Likewise, after the Abe incident, members of the Diet who attended UC-related events or even sent a single congratulatory message were harshly criticized in the media and pressured to issue apologies. Under this sustained campaign, Prime Minister Kishida finally declared that the Liberal Democratic Party will cut ties with the UC. Later, we found a table published on the website of the Consumer Affairs Agency, comparing the number of consultations received by consumer centers, concerning the UC with the total number of consultations. According to this data, in June 2022, just before the Abe incident, consultations concerning the UC accounted for merely 0.003% of the total. This bar chart compares the number of consultations handled by consumer centers regarding Japanese major new religious groups, including the UC. Our lawyer recently researched it, and according to it, in 2021, the year before the Abe assassination incident, the number of consultations concerning the UC was 27, whereas Japan's largest new religious group accounted for 67 cases, more than double as many as the UC. The UC was only third or fourth among them. Later, a periodical was found in which a major lawyer of anti-UC network stated the number of consultations related to the UC has declined. He says they were struggling, being overwhelmed with consultations from small unfamiliar groups rather than UC-related consultations. The fact that only the UC became the target of attacks can be explained by nothing other than political motives. In principle, when the government finds the decision was wrong, it should correct its course. However, like a large object, such as a train, once begins to move, cannot stop easily. The government didn't stop. In October 2022, the government abruptly changed its interpretation of the Religious Corporations Act over one night, declaring that even civil torts could constitute grounds for dissolution. The government enacted new laws and policies, new law to restrict solicitation of donation, new law to promote claims against the UC, governmental decision on anti-UC instruction in school. Finally, October 13, 2023, the government filed lawsuits seeking the dissolution of the UC. They even submitted fabricated evidence to the court instead of giving up the lawsuit. In court, the UC exposed the fabrication of the evidence. Normally, the courts should have dismissed the dissolution petition. Instead, it recognized the grounds for dissolution based merely on speculation that there must be unknown victims, while it recognized that there were few actual civil cases. Thus, they valued false impression over facts. The manipulation of public opinion also reached local governments. Several local assemblies adopted resolutions declaring cutting ties with the UC. In Fukuoka City, the government decided not to allow UC and its related groups to rent public facilities. As a result, the UC could no longer hold Christmas gatherings, and even peaceful marches were obstructed. In Shimane Prefecture, support for volunteer activities by UC members was terminated. In fact, local authorities were so far as to order the removal of flowers planted by children as part of the volunteer work. In Yamaguchi Prefecture, UC members were refused to eat at a restaurant. When the UC or its affiliated organization filed defamation lawsuits to restore their honor, the courts dismissed them all. One of the abnormal cases was a UC member, Mr. Goto's case. He had been a victim of deprogramming for 12 years and 5 months and he sued the deprogrammers. In 2014, the UN recommended that Japan act against deprogramming during his case. As a result, he ultimately won his case at the Supreme Court in 2015. However, after Abe assassination case, an anti-UC journalist announced in a TV program that Mr. Goto had simply been a social withdrawer, which meant he won the deprogramming case by false claim. Mr. Goto filed a defamation lawsuit. At the first instance, he won, but at the second instance, the court reversed the ruling based on the testimonies of the very defendants of the deprogramming case. It can be said that Japan as a whole is completely dominated by false impressions. This problem has even influenced actions in a neighboring country under the prevailing social climate that cults must not be allowed to influence politics. Even Mrs. Hak Jae-han Moon, the co-founder of the UC, was arrested in Korea. Persecuting people who hold a certain faith based solely on fabricated impression is like the Holocaust. We sincerely request the protection of our human rights from the international community. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kondo, for your presentation, and especially thank you for your strenuous efforts for the last 3 years in defending this case amid great opposition. Now, I'd like to turn to Mrs. Patricia Duval, an attorney and a member of the Paris Bar in France, specialist on international human rights law, who is also the lawyer for the Japanese chapter of the Family Federation of Former Unification Church. Ms. Duval, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello. I would like to address 2 points today regarding this situation. The first one being the illegality of dissolution under international human rights law. The dissolution is based on Article 81 of the Religious Corporations Law, which provides that a court may order dissolution if, in violation of laws and regulations, the religious corporation commits an act which is clearly found to harm public welfare substantially. In the present case, the ministry which oversees religious matters filed a request for a dissolution order from the Tokyo District Court and maintained the following, I'm quoting, "From around 1980 to 2023, Unification Church believers caused significant damage to many people by making them donate, by restricting their free decision and preventing their normal judgment," this is the accusation of brainwashing, "which resulted in disrupting the peaceful life of many people, including the family members. But, as Dr. Fiegel stated, Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which Japan is committed to, does not allow for such a limitation to the right to manifest one's religion or belief. Disturbing the life of many people is not a motive of public order, making state interference necessary to limit this right. Displeasing some people is actually called freedom of belief. I would like to underline here that for all the period of time which the ministry is relying on in its claim, the government has given carte blanche to extremist lawyers and consensual religions to deprogram Unification Church members by force. That is, kidnappings by trickery and illegal confinements by families, and imposed indoctrination against the church beliefs by Protestant pastors. So my question is, who disturbed who exactly? Those deprogrammers and their supporters broke families by the thousands. Around 4,300 believers were coercively subjected to deprogramming over the 4 decades mentioned by the ministry, with the government's blessing and voluntary inaction, which resulted in thousands of families devastated and unable to repair. Thousands of parents were abused and talked into submitting their adult children believers to deprogramming. The government should actually be the one held accountable for those family breakings. In its claim of disturbance, the ministry relied on 32 adverse civil court decisions in cases filed by former members from some 20 to 40 years before, after their deprogramming. Those members were coerced by their deprogrammers and lawyers to file financial claims against the church to prove their real intention to abandon the faith and to be released from confinement. In each of all these civil cases, the courts found torts against the church based on the allegation that it violated so-called social norms. But social norms is a vague and arbitrary concept that has no place in matters of religious beliefs and practices, and violates, alike public welfare, the duty of neutrality of Japan in religious matters and its commitment to abide by the covenant. The UN Human Rights Committee, which has been created by the covenant to monitor its implementation by state parties, has consistently urged Japan to stop using the notion of public welfare to limit freedom of religion or belief. Japan ratified the covenant in 1979 and therefore accepted the committee's authority for this monitoring. Since 1980, 1 year later, the committee has denounced the inclusion in Japanese law of the concept of public welfare to limit civil liberties and made the following recurrent demand to Japan. The committee, I'm quoting, the committee reiterates its concern that the concept of public welfare is vague and open-ended, and urges the state party to refrain from imposing any restriction on the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion unless they fulfill the strict conditions set out in Article 18. It can be concluded that the Japanese authorities have known for 45 years that they had to review their internal laws in order to conform to the covenant, but have consistently refused to do so under fake pretense, and therefore have consistently violated their international commitments. They are actually about to eliminate an entire religion on this illegal basis. Additionally, the concept of social appropriateness opens the door to discrimination and domination by consensual religions, like what happened with the Protestant deprogrammers. It directly conflicts with all the standards set by the Human Rights Committee in its comment number 22 on Article 18. The committee said, "The terms belief and religion are to be broadly construed. Article 18 is not limited in its application to traditional religions or to religions and beliefs with institutional characteristics or practices analogous to those of traditional religions. The committee, therefore, views with concern any tendency to discriminate against any religion or belief for any reason, including the fact that they are newly established or represent religious minorities that may be the subject of hostility on the part of a predominant religious community. Therefore, in the absence of any statute law violation or crime, public opinion hostility can never be a justification for courts to limit the right to manifest one's religion or belief on the basis of religious practicing lacking so-called social appropriateness. Yet, this has been the basis for the 32 civil tort decisions on which the dissolution order was issued. Now, the second point I want to address now is the government plan to re-educate the children against their parents' faith. This is the other aspect that is really against the law. After Prime Minister Abba's assassination, the Anti-Unification Church Lawyers Network published various opinion papers in 2023 to push for repressive measures to be adopted by the government against the church. They issued one in particular on the issue of second-generation members, which inspired a subsequent plan adopted by the government at a cabinet meeting in January 2024 to, quote, re-educate the children of church members within the Japanese public school system. Based on a twisted and malicious reinterpretation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which protects the rights of children to freedom of religion or belief, those lawyers have determined that children from minority religious groups have to be rescued from their parents' faith, since they allege children may not necessarily be practicing religion out of their own free will. And that's called children education. Anyway, therefore, they maintain that critical thinking towards their parents' faith should be instilled in them. The lawyers justify it by stating that, I'm quoting, individuals who grow up in such environments, their parents' religion, during the formative years of their personality, often remain unable to break away from the religious doctrines instilled in them, even after reaching adulthood. It is clear from this explanation that the purpose is to prevent the children of church members from becoming believers themselves and followers of the religion in the future. The plan adopted by the government provides for widespread education of children who have not expressed any requests or problems on potential abuses they could be the victims of due to their parents' religious beliefs. This includes wide-range distribution of cartoons figuring in post-religious education and verbal reprimands or mentions of her as psychological abuse. It is coupled with distribution of SOS mini-letters where children can ask for free information and counseling through hotlines. These all are distributed to children. The teachers are requested to identify and single out the children belonging to the Unification Church community who would need specific counseling, and quoting, even in the absence of explicit statements from the child. Then, for this counseling to be effective, the government plan provides that counselors will be trained by hostile former members in order to utilize their, quote, knowledge, and expertise concerning the Church. Thus, the government is using former members hostile to the Church as training instructors for counseling the children of current members once they have been singled out from the rest of the children. This constitutes a blatant violation of Japan's duty of neutrality in religious matters and an impermissible interference with the right of parents to ensure the religious and moral education of their children in conformity with their own convictions as protected in the Covenant and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Patricia Duval. You explained a very serious situation in Japan, which is hardly believable to find in a democratic nation like Japan. But this is a reality, and our last speaker will talk about this as a testimony. She comes from Japan. Her name is Yoshiko Nishi. She's a second-generation member of the Unification Church or Family Federation based in Japan. Her parents are from America and Japan, and her husband is from Korea. She will be speaking about the impact of religious persecution in Japan as a mother of 5 children. Yoshiko-san, you have the floor.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Ball, for your speech. Actually, I learned so much about the actual plans of the government from Mr. Ball, and I was able to tell my friends and my family members what to be careful about. So thank you so much for your work. Distinguished delegates, honorable representatives and defenders of human rights, it is a profound honor to stand before you today. I am here to speak for the rights of my religious community in Japan. Excuse me. I never imagined that in the 21st century, in one of the world's most advanced democracies, I would need to defend these most basic rights: the right to believe, the right to worship freely, and the right to raise our children in faith without fear. Yet today, in Japan, this freedom is under grave threat, and the precedent being set could endanger every faith community across Asia and beyond. My name is Yoshiko Nishi, and I am a second-generation member of the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. My mother is American, my father is Japanese, and my husband is Korean. And my Korean husband served for 12 years as an officer in the Korean Army, and today he works as a firefighter. Together we are raising 5 children, 4 boys, and 1 baby girl, ages 2, 7, 9, 12, and 17. Excuse me. I love my family, and I love my faith. My faith has taught me to live for others, to put God first, and to build peace, beginning in the family. When we moved to Japan 5 years ago, I believed we were coming to one of the most safe and harmonious nations in the world, a country that values tradition, family, and peace. I studied Japanese history and Shinto spirituality with reverence, and I wanted my children to be proud of their Japanese heritage. But then, 3 years ago, on July 8th, 2022, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated. And together with millions of Japanese, my family and I, we mourned his death deeply. I admired his leadership. our community shared much of his vision: strengthen families, uphold freedom, and promote international friendship. However, instead of uniting in grief, my country turned to blame, and that blame fell on my church. We had absolutely nothing to do with the crime. Yet ties were made that the assassin's mother had once donated to our church. With this fact alone, politicians and the media declared my community guilty. This is a scapegoat. They argued that children of faithful parents may grow up resentful enough to become dangerous. And so their conclusion was simple: destroy this church. 3 years have passed, but the assassin's trial hasn't even begun. Yet the persecution of my community has not stopped for a single day. The true reason for the attack on my church is rarely spoken. The government and the media say that they're dissolving my church because they make up some kind of stupid reason, like because we make big donations, or our children don't want to go to church, or something like that. There's no reason. But the true reason that we are being attacked is because we defend and share Prime Minister Abe's conservative vision. So they wanted to get rid of us along with Prime Minister Abe. And then they put the blame on us. And they are also attacking us because we actively oppose communism. In order to dissolve our church, Japan has even changed the interpretation of the law. Religious organizations can now be dissolved over civil cases, even if they have no criminal record. Think about this. Any faith community, if unpopular, misunderstood, or politically inconvenient, can now be dismantled. Our church has existed in Japan for more than 60 years. It has never committed a crime, yet today it faces dissolution. Court hearings are closed, evidence is presented selectively, and even fabricated. We demand fairness, but even the judiciary system seems driven by political and media pressure. This is not justice, this is persecution. And it sets a precedent that threatens every minority or religion in Japan. But beyond law, I want you to see the human cost, what this means for families like mine. Public halls refuse to rent to us. Members lose jobs and reputations are destroyed. There is a witch hunt to uncover the identity of members, children in schools. Companies and even charity groups are defamed. Children are bullied at school. Counselors are trained to see children of faith as victims. Bringing your child to worship is seen as abuse. Donations are seen as exploitation. And all of this, the media is teaching society to despise the people of my church. Sadly, this is not new. Japan has a dark history of deprogramming. Agents charge families huge sums of money to abduct adult believers and confine them for months, even years, until their faith is broken. This is proven by publicly attacking our church in court or in the media. Journalists have documented more than 4,000 such cases. When I was 9 years old, 2 young women living with my family disappeared. Later, I learned that they had been confined and forced to denounce their beliefs. Now, under government sanction, the same logic is being applied nationwide. Children of believers are labeled as victims who must be rescued from their own parents. Counselors are being trained by former believers, and re-education centers are being prepared. This is deprogramming reborn on a national scale, and the targets are now children, the most vulnerable of all. I have 5 children myself. 4 of them are under 12 years old. I am frightened that they will grow up facing religious discrimination and bullying fueled by the school system and the media. Some may say, this is only Japan's problem, but I tell you, it is not. If Japan succeeds in dissolving an entire religious community without proof of criminal wrongdoing, it will send a dangerous signal to other governments. You too can erase any faith community that stands in your way. Today it is my church in Japan. Tomorrow it could be yours, your church, your mosque, your temple. So I ask you, if Japan, a nation admired for its democracy, abandons religious freedom, what is to become of the rest of Asia? Distinguished delegates, I wish to appeal to your conscience as fellow human beings. What if your child were told that attending church with you was abuse? You are abusing your child. What if your neighbors whispered that your family was dangerous simply because of your beliefs? What if your government told you, abandon your faith or we will erase your entire community? Would you not cry out for help? Would you not hope the international community would defend you? And so my plea is simple and urgent. Please raise your voice for religious freedom in Japan. I do not stand here in anger. I stand here in hope because I love Japan. I love its people, its traditions, and its spirituality. But today, Japan stands at a crossroads, and that is why I ask for your help to ensure that fundamental rights are preserved. Distinguished delegates, defenders of freedom, I speak as a mother for my children and for the next generation. I have faith that if we stand together, freedom will not be lost. That my children and your children will inherit a world where they can believe, worship, and love without fear. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoshiko-san. Thank you for your moving testimony. We know that your situation is shared by many other thousands of families in Japan. Thank you very much.